If you went on a road trip and you didn't stop for a Big Mac or drop a crispy fry between the car seats or use your McDonald's bag as a placemat, then that wasn't a road trip. It was just a really long drive. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating McDonald's.
Welcome back to I Want That Too, the podcast where Disney merch meets Disney history. I'm entertainer writer Jim Hill, and as always, I'm joined by the lovely Lauren Hersey.
Hey, Jim. How's it going?
Reasonably well. The first day of a new month, so out running all sorts of chores. What about you?
Yeah, same. I don't know if I told you. Did I tell you that we just booked a Disney trip coming up?
Your husband mentioned something about this to the effect of, and again, not to tell tales out of school here, but you've had some fairly significant plumbing issues at your house, right? A rather large project came out of the blue?
Yes, I think I mentioned before the giant hole in my backyard, but we really, really, really wanted to go on vacation. So we are going to try to do the world's cheapest trip to Disney. I'll let you know how that goes. But our cast member friend reached out and he did offer to take me back to property control.
Oh dear.
So I could, but I feel like I need to buy the merch for the podcast, right?
Well, there we go. You're willing to make that sacrifice. I'm such a noble cause, Lauren. Really?
I know.
Okay.
I know, right?
Okay.
But anyways, we've got a great show lined up today. We are continuing our chat about Toy Story. And, Toy Story 5 has recently had some news come out. We covered that on the last episode. But that movie was really pretty groundbreaking for its time. And I know you have a lot to say about it.
Again, I'm old. I experienced a lot of this in real time. In fact, what's interesting, again, Toy Story, 1995, and that's the interesting thing. 30 years this year. And so many of the folks who worked on that have risen up through the ranks at Pixar. And that's the interesting part is, as more and more of them retire, it's like, okay, now we can tell you the real stories. And we'll get to a couple of those today.
Yeah, that's where we get the juicy stuff. But before we get into the juicy, what do we thank our sponsor?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so, and this time around, it's Unlocked Magic. Now, these are the folks who offer real savings, up to 12% off theme park tickets to Walt Disney World and Universal Orlando. By the way, same trusted team behind the DVC rental store and the DVC resale market. And those folks have helped families save over $10 million. So whether you're headed to Andy's backyard, at Toy Story Land, at Disney's Hollywood Studio, or grabbing merch at the World of Disney, why not save a little cash even before you walk through the gate? So head on over to unlockedmagic.com and make your next trip a little more magical and a lot more affordable. Okay, so news. What do we got for news?
I wouldn't say that it is technically news because we covered all the Toy Story 5 kind of news, what came out. We know that the gang is coming back. We know that Toy Story 5 is now coming in June of 2026. We've got a new challenge, your words, with Lily Pad being like the iPad vying for attention. Do you know anything about Conan O'Brien's character? We did not talk about that.
Smarty Pants. Okay, I have to be careful here because, again, I just mentioned I have friends at Pixar, and they haven't talked about who Smarty Pants is yet. I mean, we know about LilyPad, the device that 8-year-old Bonnie uses. All right, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to be... the Magic 8 Ball says come back later. I need to put some time between who shared that info with me and putting it out there. Because right now, there's only a few people who know Conan O'Brien's role in the story. How about this, though? Let's talk about who else just joined the vocal cast of Toy Story 5. And that's Ernie Hudson, one of the original Ghostbusters. He's going to be voicing Combat Carl, who, I don't know, did you ever see what was it? The Toy Story of Terror, the holiday special they did.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so Combat Carl, who actually is introduced in the very first Toy Story movie. In fact, he's the unfortunate toy. He gets blown up in Sid's backyard. At one point, Woody's looking out the window with the tiny little binoculars. Oh no, it's a Combat Carl. But ties a firecracker to his back and explodes him. But Combat Carl didn't get to talk until we got Toy Story of Terror, and at that time it was Carl Weathers who'd played Apollo Creed in all of the Rocky movies, and unfortunately we lost Carl a year or so ago, and so Ernie Hudson has stepped up and now will be the voice of Combat Carl. So hopefully that will have distracted you from the fact that I've mentioned absolutely nothing about Conan O'Brien. So there we go.
Okay, because I was Googling it, trying to find out, who is Smarty Pants? What's he up to? So maybe on a later podcast we can hear a little bit more.
There we go. Okay.
But this is a merch podcast, so I did want to talk just a little bit about that and how Toy Story is kind of like the gift that keeps on giving. Like recently, we've talked a lot about Stitch and how there's always been a lot of Lilo and Stitch merch out, and now, I mean, there's even more. So it's just something that doesn't really go out of style. And I mean, you could still get the traditional, like, talking Woody dolls, or, if you go down to Disney World, they have, like, Slinky Dog, obviously, make your own Forky Kits. Like, you can get all that stuff still on the DisneyStore.com. But, it makes sense if I'm connecting the dots. And for a future show, we need to figure out, like, what movies have sold the most merch. But Toy Story is just like the gift that keeps on giving. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the total budget for the films was $720 million, and they've grossed more than $3.3 billion worldwide. And so my research here says that it is the 21st highest grossing film franchise worldwide and the 4th highest grossing animated franchise in general.
Yeah, those numbers jibe. But here's the thing about Toy Story. Every time there's a new installment, or even just a character cameo in the parks, you see this new wave of merch interest. Again, me personally, I'm old. I have seen Woody and Buzz go from crazy hot toys in the 90s to, now they're in the clearance bins in the mid-2000s, and then back front and center on the end caps in Toy Story 3. But it is a franchise with a lot of merch muscle.
It's true. And I mean, I feel like now my youngest was born in 2006, right? So we were after the first movie, but since he's been around, I remember Hunter's 18 now, and he really wanted the original Woody plush when he was little. And then, we were able to kind of pass those down to my daughter Lainey. But by the time Toy Story 3 came out, he was begging for the video game, and that was a big ask. He even wanted to spend his own money on it. Then we have our youngest, Miles. He got, he was also Toy Story. His room right now in our current house is a Toy Story theme. He got the old toys, but as he's gotten older, I'm wondering that by the time Toy Story 5 hits, if he's not going to want the action figure, that he's going to want the Fortnite Buzz Lightyear skin or something like that. So I think something that Toy Story does really well is it has the traditional merch, but it also kind of evolves with the times.
Yeah, and as you mentioned on the last show, between the lily pad that Bonnie uses and, more to the point, Smarty Pants, the character we can't talk about, that's a thing. This is a Toy Story. I mean, just the elevator pitch for this movie, that it's tech versus toys. It's that much more relevant for 2025, 2026, but at the same time, we still get the characters that we love from the first 4 films.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really that emotional bond with these characters is definitely still here. And I mean, like, I think that there are quite a bit of, Toy Story collectors. Like, you had talked about John Lasseter on the last episode,
Yep.
and how he wouldn't sign these toys in the boxes because they're just gonna go on like an eBay or whatever. And with Alice's Jessie doll, how it was so loved that he was able to sign that. Do you want to talk about the collectors a little bit?
Well, it's so funny you bring up the original toys from 1995, which were made by Thinkway. And you have to understand that Thinkway only got the deal because Hasbro and Mattel said no. And in fact, a couple of things. Mattel said no very early because remember in Toy Story 2, they make a very big deal about Barbie being in that movie because they went to Mattel because Barbie was originally a huge part of the original Toy Story. In fact, they wrote her this killer scene, Lauren. It's the moment where Buzz has been taken out to the backyard at Sid's house, and they're strapping the firecracker to his back, and Woody is locked in Sid's bedroom and frantic. He's got to save his friend, but what's he going to do? And he hears in the distance this car like drive, and the door to Sid's room bursts open, and it's Barbie in her pink convertible. All right, but she's got a leather jacket on and dark sunglasses, and she literally quotes Schwarzenegger from Terminator, "Come with me if you want to live." So she's the one who drives him downstairs and gets him to the backyard, and I'll go get help. Barbie was the hero, and this was the thing. Mattel was like, no. Barbie isn't the Terminator. And so they said no, and we were just talking about Combat Carl, and you have to understand that the toy that John Lasseter really wanted was G.I. Joe, which was Hasbro's. And Hasbro was, all right, so, first of all, the G.I. Joe you want is the one we did back in the 1960s. And since 1982, we've been doing 3-inch tall action figures. And what are you going to do with G.I. Joe in the backyard? You're going to blow him up. No, you can't blow up our character. And so this is how it became Combat Carl. Now, mind you, what's interesting is Hasbro was pragmatic about it. They said no to G.I. Joe, but on the other hand, they're like, what are you going to do with Mr. Potato Head? Don Rickles is going to voice him? Okay, yeah, you can have Mr. Potato Head. But here's the thing: these two big toy companies, they also looked at the early designs, and again, remember, this is the first film being done in CG, and it's those look hard, and toys are cuddly, and I don't know, these toys are talking like adults. So Hasbro Mattel passed, and Thinkway literally. This brand new company was like, sure, we'll take it. Just for the notion of, okay, this Pixar company, it's in business with Disney. If we do this project for them, maybe we'll get more business from Disney.
I never even heard of Thinkway before.
Well, this is the thing. Of course, as soon as Toy Story came out and it became this massive hit, and the very small run of toys that Thinkway made, because they were a teeny tiny company, disappeared immediately. And then it became another one of those Cabbage Patch doll situations where, people fighting in stores over Toy Story toys. Though, quick side note here, I got a Woody, a Buzz, and a Rex on the opening day of the film. But you'll love this, Lauren. I got them at Mickey's of Glendale's, the store, the store on Main Street in MGM. On the day the movie came out. And because I had my cast member friend there with me, because we had literally gone to see the first matinee of Toy Story. Then we drove over to the studio and caught the very first performance of the Toy Story parade ever. So it was, two back-to-back firsts, and it was like, this is good. I like this. And so, but again, with the help of my my cast member friend, I want to say I got the toys for 40% off. However, I wasn't thinking. I actually opened the boxes and gave them to my then teeny tiny daughter to play with. And Alice teethed a lot on Rex, actually.
I was just going to say, if you didn't open them, you could have bought Alice a car for what they're worth. The one I found was 10 grand.
Yep.
The Buzz.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's the thing. Alice loved these things. One can have regrets looking back at what these things are going for now, but on the other hand, the memories of literally just was so funny that here's my daughter gnawing on a T-Rex rather than the other way around. And and you got to remember that the original Jurassic Park had only just come out, so it was kind of ironic. But
listen, but those memories are priceless. So sorry, Alice, you didn't get a car, but lesson learned. But anyways, so Toy Story, I mean, they're selling these $10,000 collector items. It's really no joke. And especially when you think about how groundbreaking that first movie really was. So stick around after the break. Jim is going to be taking us back to 1995, pre-1995, and unpack how it all got started and why it changed animation forever.
What does every USAA member have in common? Family. We're one big family who supports the military community and their eligible families. And if you, your parent, or spouse served, you could join our family and save big on auto insurance. Visit USAA.com/join today to check your eligibility. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
This MailChimp-verific jingle is brought to you by MailChimp.
MailChimp, your marketing with AI and more. Advanced automations to connect to your store. MailChimp, your marketing and boost your clicks. Multi-channel campaigns now with SMS. That's lit.
MailChimp your marketing today with the #1 AI-powered email marketing and automation platform, Intuit MailChimp. #1 based on publicly available data on competitors' customers. Plans vary. SMS available as add-on. Visit MailChimp.com.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
And we're back. Okay, so as Lauren alluded to, the story of Toy Story actually begins before the film comes out in 1995. If we want to tell how we got a Toy Story, we have to go all the way back to 1988. By the way, the year that John Lasseter married his lovely wife, Nancy. But that very same year, Tin Toy, the Pixar short, made its debut. And what was interesting about this is it won the Academy Award for Best Animated Short the next year. And so a lot of folks came calling at that time. And among the folks that came calling was Disney. Now, you got to remember, the film came out in 1988. It actually won the Academy Award the following year, in March of '89. And then in November of that same year is when The Little Mermaid came out. And now Disney is suddenly, we can make a lot of money now from animation. So maybe we want to have more animated films. And how would we do that? And well, one of the ways you could have more animated films is if you sign deals with outside companies. And by the way, another weird little bend on the story, Lauren. Around the same time, Tim Burton came calling at Disney and said, hey, I wrote a thing called The Nightmare Before Christmas when I worked for you guys, and Now I've just made Batman for Warner Brothers, and it's just made more money than God. If I give you some money, will you give that back to me? Yet it's like, we're Disney. We don't ever give anything back. However, we will, if you'd like. We'd be willing to partner with you, and if you want to make a full-length movie version of Nightmare, we would be happy to fund the production of that, and we'll release it through our things. And Burton's like, well, okay, at least I get to work with that material again. So, all right, let's sign a contract. And Lauren, it's only because Disney had previously made that deal with Tim Burton that there was precedent to then go to Pixar and say, okay, how about you make an outside movie for us? And the interesting part was what John Lasseter initially pitched to them was like, well, we'll tell you what, Tin Toy, the little character in Tin Toy, the Tinny, we were thinking it's only a 7-minute long short, and we don't know if we can do a 90-minute long feature, but how would you feel about a half-hour long Christmas special? And they actually went off and boarded this thing called A Tin Toy Christmas. And they bring it to Jeffrey Katzenberg, and he's like, look, this is nice, but I can't make a lot of money off a half-hour long television special. On the other hand, if you can make a half-hour long television special, tell you what if we paid you to make 3 half-hour long television specials? Because that's a feature. That's 90 minutes. And that's how Jeffrey sort of cajoled them into making a full-length film, the original Toy Story. That said, for a while there, in fact, there was a famous time in November of 1993 when they actually referred to it as Black Friday, that they came down to Burbank to show the latest version of Toy Story. And they had followed every single story note that Jeffrey Katzenberg had given them. And what's interesting, Lauren, you can go online right now and watch key scenes from this version from 93. And there's no other way to say this. Woody was a jerk. He was mean to the other toys. He actually pushes Buzz out the window to get rid of him. And the thing was that Disney's like, this is so mean. Nobody's going to want to see this movie. And so they literally shut it down. And the folks from Pixar went back up to, well, at this point, they weren't in Embryville. They were in Port Richmond. In fact, wonderful, funny stories from during this era when they're making Toy Story. They're in a strip mall. They're not an animation studio. They've just rented offices in the town of Port Richmond. And just up the street is a Chevron plant. And, what was interesting about working there is every so often the secretary, the receptionist at the front was like, okay, nobody go out in the parking lot. Chevron's had a gas leak and there's toxic fumes. We'll let you know when it's okay. So, they're not making the movie under ideal circumstances. But they go back up to Port Richmond and they're like, all right, screw it. Let's stop listening to the notes we're getting from Disney. Let's make the sort of movie we want to make. And that made the difference. It became the Toy Story we know and love today. Now, what helped was that summer of 1994, Jeffrey Katzenberg got pushed out at Disney. Michael Eisner felt, long story short, Frank Wells had died that spring. Jeffrey Katzenberg really, really pushed to get Frank Wells' job at Disney after his death. Eisner thought that Jeffrey was being insensitive and pushed him out the door. But Jeffrey then just months later goes and sets up DreamWorks SKG with Spielberg and Geffen and creates the DreamWorks that would eventually go on to make Shrek and, well, But because Jeffrey was out of the building, the heat was kind of off of Pixar and they could make the movie they wanted to make. But even right up until, I want to say it was March of 1994, they had the shareholders meeting for Disney, and it was the first time the general public had ever seen anything from Toy Story, and they picked the scene where Woody sends the Green Army men down to the birthday party to find out what Andy's getting for gifts, and people lost their minds. It's like, oh my God, that movie looks great. And it was only at that point that Disney was, we might have a hit here. And does somebody want to talk to Mattel and Hasbro now? Because Thinkway was the one who got the contract there. But anyway, movie comes out in November of 1995. Massive hit. So much so that Disney, which at this point only has a 3-picture deal with Pixar, actually, hang on, we may want to renegotiate this contract.
And that's 3 pictures in general.
No, that's it exactly. So, but Steve Jobs, who again, gentleman in charge of Pixar, who by the way, every so often, that's another thing about the poor guys up at Port Richmond. Every so often they'd find out that Steve, who'd been pouring money into this thing and hadn't gotten any back, kept looking for people to buy Pixar. And so finally, when it had a hit film, he turned around and became the biggest champion of Pixar. And so when Disney came calling and said, we'd like to extend the deal, we'd like to go from a 3-picture deal to a new 5-picture contract. And Jobs was so smart about what he did. He's like, okay, we can do that. However, going forward now, every time there's a movie poster or there's a movie trailer or there's a TV commercial, the name Pixar and Disney are linked. And in fact, they have to be the exact same size. Just he was all about using the success of these films to grow the brand. Right. And it turned out to be the brilliant move. But anyway, that gets us to Toy Story 2, which we talked about, I want to say, at length in our last episode, didn't we?
Yeah,
okay.
We did.
All right. Well, we'll tell you what, when we get back from this break, we're going to talk a bit about Toy Story 4, because I have an interesting tie to that project.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. There's only one true way to experience the all-electric luxury SUV Polestar 3, and that's to take a test drive. It can go from 0 to 60 in as little as 4.8 seconds with the dynamic handling of a sports car. But to truly understand how it commands the road, you need to be behind the wheel. Up to 350 miles of range, the 3D surround sound system by Bowers & Wilkins. It's all something you have to experience to believe. So book your test drive for Polestar 3 today at polestar.com.
This episode is brought to you by San Pellegrino Ciao, a new kind of flavored sparkling water. The kind made with real fruit juice, a pinch of Sicilian salt, and the sparkle of the Italian sun. With no added sugar and just 10 or less calories per can, enjoy. With love, from Italy. By San Pellegrino Ciao now.
This summer, try the new Strato Frappuccino blended beverage at Starbucks. It's the classic blended iced coffee you know and love, now topped with a creamy layer of handcrafted brown sugar cold foam. Available for a limited time. Your Strato Frappuccino is ready at Starbucks.
And we're back. Okay, so earlier in today's show, we're talking about Toy Story 5, comes out June 2026. And I know on our last show, we did talk a bit about Toy Story 4, but we talked mostly about Toy Story 2 and how, for example, that film has Jessie because Nancy Lasseter was the one who made that happen. She was the one who said, you need a strong female character in this. Well, Nancy Lasseter is such an important part of the Pixar story. Because, again, we alluded to a few moments ago how, let's be honest here, until there was a Toy Story, Pixar was the company that made great little animated shorts and Tropicana commercials and Listerine commercials. Do you ever see the Listerine commercial where it's in the boxing ring and the Listerine bottle's beating up bad breath?
I don't know about that, Jim.
Well, no, I mean, if you want to see some fascinating stuff, Google early Pixar commercials. And for example, they have a Tropicana commercial where it's an orange juice bottle swinging on a vine like Tarzan. I mean, they did wonderful stuff, but they weren't making any money. And which means that John Lasseter wasn't really getting paid well. Now, on the other hand, his wife, Nancy, they actually met at a computer graphics a conference in 1985. And Nancy was a grown-up. Nancy had a real 9-to-5 job. She also had a son from a previous marriage, but she and John, in fact, this tells you about what a nerd John Lasseter was. That a key component of their first date, he took her out to dinner and then took her back to his apartment where he showed her a Miyazaki movie. It's just sort of like, oh, you slick devil, you. That's how you close the deal. Show her a little Howl's Moving Castle. But all right, anyway, John is the one who's working at the place that's doing TV commercials and these shorts. And so it's Nancy who's got the full-time job, who's paying the mortgage, who's keeping the bills down. And meanwhile, they have four more boys. And it's only in 1995 when there's a Toy Story where John noticed this very interesting thing, that they would be out at parties and they'd be talking with folks at the party and they go, what do you do? Well, I work for a computer graphics company. And people would engage her in conversation. But after Toy Story came out, it's like, oh, you're Mrs. John Lasseter. Oh, I'd love to talk to your husband. And it was just one of these things. Wait. I wouldn't have anything if it weren't for my wife, Nancy, who made all of these sacrifices early. And so John decided, after the success of Toy Story 3 in 2010, it's like, all right, so what are we going to do with the next one? He says, look, we didn't have Bo Peep in Toy Story 3. I want to do a story that explains what happened to Bo Peep. I want this to be a romance. I want this. My wife was the one who said, we need a strong female character. I want Bo Peep to become a strong female character. I want this to be a love story. I want this to be a Valentine to my wife. And so that's what ends up happening. In fact, I want to say it's as early as 2011 that Tom Hanks actually let slip that there's a Toy Story 4 in the works. Now, mind you, it wouldn't officially be announced until 2014. But in the meantime here, Lauren, I'm at a D23 Expo. And I'm actually, at that point, for some reason, the people at Pixar really like me. I mean, for example, I was the MC of a panel for Pixar shorts at that event. In fact, they introduced Luna at that thing. And it was during this time that the folks at Pixar were like, hey, Jim, and by the way, I was working for the Huffington Post back then, so I was working for a fairly big outlet. But, we want to kind of clue you in to what's happening with Toy Story 4 and how it's this very personal story to John Lasseter. And we were wondering if you'd like to work with us to tell that story. And so, what? Yeah, here's the thing. There was this whole, this whole plan. I was actually going to sit down with John and Nancy to talk with them about their history and their love story and their family. Because that's the other thing. During the same time, this is also when the Lasseter family has bought a vineyard up in Napa Valley. And in fact, Nancy's now running that. And the Lasseter vineyards, the wines that are being made there are being served on the Disney Cruise Line. And it's this very big moment. And the notion was that because this film was going to be a Valentine to Nancy, I'm going to get to tell the story. And what they especially loved is like, you've got a Nancy, John's got a Nancy, and you've got a Nancy, and you love your Nancy too. So it's like, oh, this is perfect. We're going to do this. And then, all right. This is where the story gets kind of tough. Probably not a good idea for the Lasseter family, too, again, who've bought that vineyard. Oh, by the way, not in Napa Valley, Sonoma Valley. My mistake. Okay. John, as it turns out, had some issues with alcohol. In fact, but here's the thing: so many people at Disney, because he was delivering so many hit films. He was helping Disney at that time fix its movies. So it's like, all right, we need to protect this guy. But every so often you'd see stuff. I mean, for example, June 2010, it's the world premiere of World of Color at DCA, and in the it used to be the old Mondavi restaurant at DCA prior to the premiere. They're having a wine tasting event up in the restaurant, and they're serving the Lasseter vineyard stuff from the Lasseter vineyard. But now it's time for the premiere, and all the celebrities come downstairs, and there's Terry Hatcher, and there's Robert Sherman, and here's John Lasseter with his family. And so they sit them right down front. And what ended up happening was that I want to say 5 minutes before World of Color premiered, there's this thing in Southern California known as the marine layer. The wind will suddenly shift direction depending on the temperature shift. So the wind that had been running across the bay away from the theme park suddenly reversed direction just before the show began and started then running over the audience.
Didn't it blow someone's clothes off?
Yes, poor Terry Hatcher's clothes. The 100-foot columns of water came cascading down on the celebrities who were seated right up front. And poor Richard Sherman, who had a really bad comb over, just that got exposed. But the thing is, the lights came up, and John Lasseter is soaked to the skin, but he's howling. He thinks this is hysterical because, again, you have to remember, prior to the show starting, they do that, just a warning for those of you down front, that you may get wet. And so John is turning to everyone around, though, you may get wet. You may get wet. But it's also clear that John has been overserved. And the Disney plaids, they help him. They help poor Terry Hatcher. But it's just one of those things. And I'm in the press section, and there's a bunch of us who see this, and nobody says a word. Because, again, it's, John Lasseter. And we like John Lasseter. And, okay, so maybe he had a little too much to drink. And, okay, we can all keep a secret. We don't want to embarrass the man. Unfortunately, by 2017, we're now in the era of Me Too. And a lot of people now, instead of, we don't want to embarrass John, it's like, he still has behaved badly. Especially at the parties after a film premiere, and he's done and said some inappropriate things to female Pixar and Disney employees, and finally the company confronts him on this, and in 2017 John voluntarily steps away from the company. There is an investigation by June of 2018. Now John is taking a consulting role at Disney, but he will formally be stepping away in December of that year. And I'm not going to lie to you, Lauren, as a direct result of this, the very personal aspects of Toy Story 4, which made it a love story, a celebration of John and Nancy, a lot of that stuff got stripped out of the movie. Now, mind you, John continue on in animation. January of 2019, he was over at Skydance Animation. He's done 2 films over there, Luck and Spellbound. And Toy Story 4, that arrived in theaters June of that same year, 2019. And it still ends with Bo Peep and Woody as a couple off having an adventure. But if you watch that movie now and understand that a lot of stuff got stripped out because of what was happening in John Lasseter's personal life, suddenly the fact that there were like 4 or 5 B stories sort of padding out the plot there, suddenly that becomes kind of clear. And again, ironically enough, in this same window of time, I stopped working for the Huffington Post. So my opportunity to tell this story went away. But yeah, I still remember I had a couple of meetings with John Lasseter, and he, sweet guy, but at the same time, as the father of a daughter, and understanding that there were a number of female Pixar employees who just felt uncomfortable around the guy, got to support what the company did.
Do you think Woody was going off to blaze his own trail? Is like, all right, John, like, you can go off and blaze your own trail somewhere else?
That's an interesting idea. But the irony is that John isn't based on Woody. John is actually Buzz. In fact, John, if you look at John Lasseter's head and you look at Buzz's head, it's the exact same head. In fact, John could do the Buzz pose with the arms at the side and, looking manly quite easily. Yeah, no, I'm not Woody, I'm Buzz.
All right. I just didn't know. Like, is that how it was going to end?
Yeah.
Who knows? We could speculate, right?
Yeah. Again, I guess my concern is that John was a crucial part of Pixar. He was literally the first employee. When Lucasfilm computer graphics department, before it was Pixar, and he hired John to be the guy to teach them how to do animation, to how to make things funny. John was the one who helped them do their first breakthrough cartoon, The Adventures of Andre and Wally B. There are a number of people who believe that the reason that the Pixar films and the Disney films aren't as good recently were because, Lasseter left the building. But on the other hand, again, you have to think that you want the women at Disney and Pixar to feel like they're in a safe place. And that's the thing. I guess those stories don't jibe with the man that I knew, that I met. But anyway.
Yeah, but I do think, Jim, on that note, before we go into sexual harassment claims, that we should probably close up shop for today.
Okay. That seems like a very wise choice.
Thank goodness.
Okay.
But next week, we're going to be talking about how Disney got into the game, quite literally, from classic board games and early licensing deals to their evolving relationships like companies like Hasbro, and how gaming shaped the way Disney connects with fans across generations.
Okay, that's like a fun thing. And Hasbro, we're back to Hasbro. All right.
It all comes back.
It all comes back. All right. And if you want to keep up on everything that's happening over at Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, you can follow us on social. And don't forget to check out our Patreon for bonus shows and early access.
Yep. And if you like today's episode, leave us a quick review. It really helps more Disney fans find us.
Okay. And again, got a question or a suggestion for a future episode? Shoot us a message at jim@jimhillmedia.com. And Lauren, yours is?
Lauren at laurenhersey.com.
Got it.
So on that note, that does it for today. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on I Want That Too.